here at Shaman's Dream Gifts in the Fox Run Mall, Newington, New Hampshire. My name is Dr. Kevin Ross Emery, and I work here a couple of times, Wednesdays and Thursdays. I'm here doing intuitive intervention sessions. I also teach here. You can find out more about me at weboflight, weboflight.com, or mydrkevin.com, mydrkevin.com. Tonight's talk is called Orlando, a Spiritual Perspective. Many people are still reeling from the tragedy that just happened in Orlando. There are a lot of whys, a lot of tears, a lot of how can this keep happening? Not just that this happened, but how can this keep happening? I told somebody that I was speaking shortly on Orlando, a Spiritual Perspective, and the first thing they did is they kind of took a look and they looked at how I was dressed and that I was going to be talking about a very serious thing like a mass murder. But you know what? I am not going to give my power away. I am not going to stop being who I am. I am not going to live in fear. And the first thing that I want to give you as a spiritual perspective for Orlando is, it is an invitation for each and every one of you not to live in fear, not to go into hiding, not to give your power away to real and perceived threats. You know, the bottom line is that of all the things that we know and don't know about Orlando, was it connected to ISIS, or was this just a demented man's reality? I've heard everything from he was involved with some fanatical right-wing Christian groups, to he was involved with ISIS, to that he was a closeted gay man that, you know, came from a religious background of homophobia and homophobic father. And it drove him to finally melt down and pull the trigger. We know he beat his wife. We know that he was struggling. He had been on watch lists, but he was mentally ill. And at the end of the day, I would say comfortably that every one of these mass murderers, these suicide bombers, these killers of people that they have no reason to hate, are all mentally ill. And I'm not trying to say that all mentally ill people are killers. And there are people with mental illnesses and emotional illnesses that do great things in the world and struggle and overcome. There are some people that are born, live, and die with mental illnesses and still do great good in the world. But I am saying that somebody that takes a gun and goes into a club and shoots 50 people, or goes into a school and shoots children, or goes into a church, a house of worship, of any kind of worship, and kills people because they are simply in that house, has a mental illness. That they are out of touch with the reality of what it is to be human. That they may have been brainwashed by powerful, hateful people who are all about domination and control. And this is supported in some parts of the world by governments, but it is supported all over the world by religions of one kind or the other. The ultimate fight always seems to be about who has the right God, and what that God says is okay and not okay. What sexual preferences, orientations, what you were born with are okay or not okay. What your gender limits you or expects of you. What your race, what your creed. That somehow, as if God only made a very narrow, limited type of person to be the right godly person. and all the rest deserve to be punished. And yet, if you sit with the greatest leaders of every world religion, they will talk about how there is a religion of love, of acceptance, how Muhammad, how Jesus, how Buddha, how Confucius, how all of these different great spiritual leaders and saints and prophets of these religions preached love and acceptance. So on one hand, it's time to stop blaming the religion, but it's time to start really looking at whose hands is it being misused in. Because those triggers that get pulled oftentimes have the fingerprints of some kind of religious nonsense. And I say that, nonsense involved. And it's nonsense because the leaders of those religious organizations, the ultimate leaders, the truly spiritual people, do not preach hate. There was a man in California, Sacramento, who came out and said that Orlando was a little safer because 50 pedophiles were dead now. And that this country would be better if it took all of the gay people and put them together and killed them. That the country would be safer. These are not the ravings of a sane person. This has nothing to do with being Christian, which was what he was a minister of, a Christian religious. Christ never said, go out and shoot them up. Kill them because they're not like you. Actually, the majority of these people that say it are not like Christ. They have nothing in common with the man. I actually hashtagged a few things. Jesus ashamed that his name would be linked with hatred. And I would say Muhammad ashamed as well. And any of them, Buddha ashamed. And in fact, I invite all of you out there, whatever your particular flavor or religion is, create a hashtag. Jesus ashamed, Muhammad ashamed, Buddha ashamed, whatever. Because they would be. Orlando, at the end of the day, had to do with the fact of untreated mental illnesses. It had to do with the fact of hate-mongering religions that are doing it for power and greed and self-serving and have nothing to do with religions. You know, it's not just an LGBT, and I'm gay, but I can say, you know what? This didn't have as much to do with LGBT as it did with a mentally disturbed man getting the push to go attack who he could mindlessly hate in that moment. Because if it was just LGBT, Sandy Hook would not have happened. Charleston, South Carolina would not have happened. Colorado would not have happened if this was just an LGBT. Are there people who will use this to flare up, to make completely outrageous and ignorant, stupid statements from a pulpit? Absolutely. But let me tell you, I will guarantee you they were making stupid and ignorant statements before this last weekend. Now, they just get to have their one moment in time to be heard as stupid and ignorant. So, Orlando is a reflection of how we have come to become quiet about hate. How often we have become apathetic or desensitized. How our very movies and media and things that are put out every day, from violence in video games to violence on movies, to the corruption of our media system and our government, that create apathetic, that oftentimes men who feel like they have been castrated by the very environment and society that they live in. And they're trying to find their manhood by picking up a gun and shooting somebody. Some have no sense of reality of what even death is, because death was associated with a level on a video game and not the taking of an actual human life, a separation. Orlando is just another wake-up call to humanity, that it's time to become human again, to remember we are more alike than different, to stand up and speak out every time somebody tries to preach judgment and hate and bigotry. The greatest thing we can do to honor the people who died in Orlando and the families who have suffered because of it is to not let people forget. But don't make it an LGBT issue. Make it an issue of hate. Make it an issue of non-acceptance. Make it an issue of something that is terribly wrong within humanity today, and that crack is getting bigger, and it's being fed by the media, by the national and political and the world leaders, political leaders. They are all feeding this schism within humanity for an us and them because they profit off of it. Because they get more power and more wealth by keeping us at each other's throats. It is time to unify. It is time to unify under a single flag that says human. We are all humans, and we need to respect, as we need to be respected, that in that which is humanity, all things exist, and all things have a right to exist. You have a right to not marry somebody of your own gender. You have a right to wear a veil. You have a right to bend on your left knee or your right knee. You have a right for baptism. You have a right to pray at whatever altar you want, as long as it does not take away from somebody else's their right to do the same thing. Honor and remember Orlando by looking at those dark places within you where you can judge and hate, where you make assumptions that create us and thems. Where do you become an us and make them someone that is not worth knowing, or someone that's not as good as you, or somebody that you have a right to kill? We must eliminate us and thems. There must only be us's. We are all us's. We are all humans. And in claiming our humanity, we can only truly, fully be human by accepting the humanity in everyone else, no matter which direction they pray, the color of their skin, their gender, the sexual orientation they were born with, whatever it is. In the acceptance of their humanity, you become more human. And we respect and move closer to ending things like Orlando, 9/11, Sandy Hook. And these things are going on all over the world 10 times more frequently than they do in the US. But they all need to end. And anyone who separates or tries to separate humanity into chunks that can fight each other, I think they should be the first people on the spaceship to the moon. Let them go fight it out over there. Isn't it time we just had a more peaceful and loving world? This is Dr. Kevin at Shaman's Dream Gifts in the Fox Run Mall in Newington, New Hampshire. Every week, almost every week, sometimes we miss one, we have a free fireside chat. You can come into the store and sit, or you can just watch it through Facebook or Periscope or any number of different ways we stream it. Next week, Amy Sabentino is going to be speaking on the Tarot. So if you've been interested in the Tarot, come. We'd love to see you. We have readers here pretty much every day of the week. We have lovely crystals and religious, spiritual objects from around the world. We have local-made jewelry, and we always have a smiling, truly smiling and friendly face. People that work here love working here, and they love seeing you come in, even if it's just for a chat or to look at a tumbled stone. So come visit us, and remember, when humanity becomes ultimately human, none of this will have to happen anymore. Namaste.